So angiosperms, these are our first flowering plants, right? Our first flowering plants. So it had everything gymnosperms had, plus flowers. Okay? So let's look at the structure of a flower. And you can kind of tell the flower, right? So what are the female parts? The female parts make up the pistil, right? And the pistil is made up of the stigma, the style, and the ovary. Right? So the stigma is right here. That's the stigma. That's the style. And that's the ovary. Those are the female parts. And the male parts are collectively called the stamen. And they make up the filament and the anther. Okay. So what part is the anther? This part. And this part is the filament. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So the process is actually really similar to the one in gymnosperms. Okay. So the only difference is now we have two different structures, right? So within the male stamen, right, more specifically the anther, what is occurring? You have the microspore mother cell, which is diploid, that undergoes meiosis to produce a microspore. And the microspore will produce what? A microgametophyte. And the microgametophyte will produce a pollen grain. Right? And again, that pollen grain contains the tube cell and the generative cell. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay. So now you have a pollen grain, right? So this is all occurring in the male part, right? Specifically the anther. So it's this part right here. That's the male part. And eventually that pollen grain will get released from the anther, right? So this gets released from the anther. Okay? And this is pretty convenient because on the same flower you have the female parts, right? So here are the female parts, and again this is the stigma. Here's the style, and here's the ovary. Okay? So where does that pollen grain from the anther go? Yeah, it lands on the stigma. Okay? So in angiosperms, pollination occurs when the pollen grain is deposited on the stigma. Okay? So that's different from gymnosperms. In gymnosperms, pollination was when the pollen grain was next to the ovule. So there's a distinction, right? Pollination in angiosperms is when pollen grain is on the stigma. Okay. So, in the female, stuff is happening too. Now let's look at the female ovary. look at ovaries. What's contained within the ovary? Your ovule, right? Your ovule is contained within the ovary, right? So let's look at the ovule, which is within the ovary. What's happening in the ovule? The same thing, right? That happened in gymnosperms. The megaspore mother cell, 2N, undergoes meiosis to produce a megaspore. Right? That megaspore is converted to a megagametophyte. Okay. Something's a little bit different this time though. In gymnosperms, the female gametophyte produced an archegonia, which produced an egg. Okay? In gymnosperms, you don't have antheridia. Okay? In angiosperms, you don't have archegonia or antheridia. Okay? So again, ferns had archegonia and antheridia. Gymnosperms produced archegonia. Angiosperms don't produce archegonia or antheridia. So eventually, this megagametophyte or female gametophyte will produce the egg. What else is produced in addition to the egg? Two polar nuclei. Two polar nuclei. Okay. So again, pollination has already occurred. So let's write a sentence. So after pollination, the pollen tube grows down the style towards the ovule. Right? So as that happens, the tube cell is elongating and the generative cell undergoes mitosis to produce two sperm. And like gymnosperms, can these sperms swim? No, they're non-motile. This time something unique happens. Both sperm live, right? So you have one sperm that will fertilize the egg to produce the zygote, which is diploid, right? That develops into the embryo. Okay? The second sperm combines with the two polar nuclei to produce what? An endosperm, which is triploid, right? 3N. What does the ovule develop into? Ovule develops into the seed, and the ovary develops into the fruit. Okay? So again, you have a zygote, an embryo, you have an endosperm, you have the seed, which came from the ovule, and the ovary developed into the fruit, right? So now this is known as double fertilization, right? Double fertilization. So if you look at a seed of an angiosperm, you're going to have an embryo that's diploid. You're going to have a seed coat, and you're going to have, instead of the female haploid gametophyte, you're going to have what? You're going to have a triploid endosperm. And this contains resources. And on the outside, so again, the seed developed from the ovule. This seed can be surrounded by a fruit which developed from the ovary, right? And the fruit allows you to be dispersed over larger distances, because now you can have a cow pick up a seed and run really far and poop out the seed, and now you can have a new plant grow, right? So this helps in dispersal of your seed, right? In terms of sporophytes and gametophytes, the gametophyte of a gymnosperm and angiosperm, can it do photosynthesis? Can the gametophyte of gymnosperm do photosynthesis? inside the seed, right? It's inside something, so it's not exposed to light. So the gametophyte of gymnosperms and angiosperms do not do photosynthesis. Are they multicellular? Yes, so they do aerobic respiration. The sporophyte of gymnosperms and angiosperms, do they do photosynthesis? They do. And they also do aerobic respiration. Right? So keep that in mind as you're going through your studies and questions. Okay, so the question, the thing is, so gymnosperm gametophytes and angiosperm gametophytes don't do photosynthesis because they're contained within the seed, right? They do aerobic respiration. The sporophytes of angiosperms and the sporophytes of gymnosperms do photosynthesis. Okay. So good luck studying, and don't forget to